Usually when we think about history, there's this underlying expectation of preservation.
Right, like things are kept intact.
Exactly. Like walking into a massive, climate-controlled archive, you expect to go to a library, pull a dusty file, and find the original documents just sitting there.
Neatly labeled.
Yeah, neatly labeled, telling a totally clear, unvarnished story.
A nice chronological record where you can just trace point A to point B without, any missing pages.
Because we crave that comfort, we really, really like our historical figures and our ancient mythologies to be neatly categorized.
Good guys in one box, bad guys in the other.
Right. Good guys in a pristine white box and the bad guys in a heavily padlocked, scary box. But then you step into the world of ancient theology, specifically the origins of Western religious mythology, and suddenly that beautiful archive.
It's a complete mess.
It looks like it's been ransacked. I mean, the files are shredded, the labels are swapped around, and we're looking at a historical landscape that honestly resembles a hostile corporate buyout.
Oh, a corporate buyout. Like that analogy.
Well, imagine a massive, ruthless conglomerate takes over 3 completely different independent departments.
Okay.
They fire the old management, they strip away all the unique nuances of those departments, and they just merge them all under one generic, terrifying brand name.
Just to dominate the market.
Exactly, to streamline their control and completely dominate the market.
And I mean, the market they're trying to dominate in this scenario isn't selling a physical product.
Yeah.
The market is human consciousness itself.
Yes.
It is the absolute definition of institutional rebranding, but executed over centuries.
And that is the exact institutional rebranding we are unpacking today for you. We've gathered a towering stack of sources for this deep dive.
A really dense stack today.
Oh, very dense. We are pulling heavily from the ancient Gnostic texts of the Nag Hammadi library, specifically looking at these incredible suppressed documents like the Apocryphon of John and the Reality of Rulers.
It's a fascinating text.
And we're crossing that ancient history with deep philosophical psychology from Carl Jung, including his highly controversial book, Answer to Job.
Which is quite a read.
To put it mildly. We are also bringing in the modern synthesis that's happening right now in esoteric Reddit communities and deep dive historical analysis from YouTube channels like the Esoteric Jesus and Psychic Codex.
So we have ancient history, psychology, and modern esoteric analysis.
All matched together. We are taking all of this to answer a simple but honestly incredibly explosive question.
Who really are Satan, Lucifer, and Samael?
That's the one. And the paradox sitting in the center of that question is what makes this entire exploration so compelling.
Because when you actually trace the source text back to their origins, you realize that for centuries, mainstream religion and pop culture have taken these 3 figures, mashed them together, presented them to the public as one singular ultimate bad guy.
The devil.
The devil. But before the ink dried on those institutional narratives, they were completely distinct entities.
Totally separate.
Totally. And not only were they distinct, they operated with totally opposing motives.
See, the ultimate aha moment for me, looking through these sources, was realizing that one of these names is literally just a job title for a prosecuting attorney.
Yeah, a celestial bureaucrat.
Right. And another one is described in the ancient texts as this ignorant, blind creator god who built a totally flawed universe.
And then the third one.
And the third one, and this is the concept that is going to fundamentally shake up how you view Western mythology. The third one was actually seen by early mystical traditions as a liberator.
A whistleblower.
Yes, a cosmic whistleblower actively trying to save humanity from a rigged system.
So to understand how human history moved from 3 distinct cosmic forces to, a cartoonish guy in a red suit holding a pitchfork.
Which is what we all picture.
Exactly. We have to start by aggressively stripping away 2,000 years of pop culture conditioning.
Yeah.
We have to look at the raw mechanics of the ancient words themselves.
Because words matter.
Words are the DNA of ideas. When you alter the word, you completely mutate the concept it carries.
So let's put that DNA under the microscope. Let's start with Satan.
Okay, Satan.
Because when you look at the original Hebrew in the Old Testament, particularly in texts like the Book of Job, the word Satan, spelled Shin Tet Nun, is not a proper name at all.
Not at all.
It's a noun. It simply translates to adversary or opponent or even obstacle. It was a functional title.
Which completely changes the reading of those ancient texts.
Completely.
In the heavenly court described in Job, the Satan was essentially the prosecuting attorney.
He's on the payroll.
He's an agent of the divine court, fully on the payroll, and his specific job was to test the faithful. He wasn't some rebel lurking in a fiery underworld.
Right.
He was a divine auditor.
So no red horns, no eternal rebellion against the heavens, just a celestial auditor showing up with a clipboard to stress test your spiritual infrastructure.
That's exactly it.
Which completely deflates the cosmic villain narrative right out of the gate. But then, okay, we look at the second name in our corporate buyout, and the linguistic shift gets truly wild. The word Lucifer.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
Because this isn't a Hebrew word.
No, it is entirely Latin.
Right.
It is a compound word made of lux, which means light, and fair, meaning to carry or to bring. So, the light bringer.
Light bringer.
And for centuries across the ancient Mediterranean world, Lucifer was nothing more than the standard astronomical term for the planet Venus.
Venus.
Specifically when Venus appeared as the morning star, rising in the east just before the sun.
And the sources gave these wonderful mundane examples of this. Like, you have Pliny the Elder and the Roman poet Virgil using the term Lucifer in their writings just to describe a beautiful pre-dawn sky.
Yeah, just poetry about the morning.
There was absolutely zero infernal, demonic, or evil connotation to the word in the ancient world. It was a celestial navigation marker.
Literally just meant the light that announces the new day is coming.
So weird to think about. Okay, and then we have the third entity caught up in this historical merger, Samael.
Right, Samael. And you won't find this name in a standard Sunday school lesson.
Definitely not.
It emerges from the deep esoteric and Gnostic lore of late antiquity. And Samael translates directly to blind God.
Blind God.
In these traditions, he is associated with the demiurge, which is a philosophical concept of a lower, ignorant creator deity.
Okay, we're definitely coming back to the demiurge.
We have to. Because this being believes he is the highest and only God, completely and tragically unaware of the true, ultimate divine realm that exists above him.
Okay, hold on. I'm stuck on something here. Let's recap. We have a Hebrew prosecuting attorney, right?
Right.
A Latin word for the planet Venus.
Yes.
And a blind, ignorant creator from mystical lore. How on earth did Lucifer, a term for a planet, end up in the Bible as the definitive name of the ultimate evil?
It's quite a jump.
That is a massive structural leap of logic.
Well, it all traces back to the mechanics of translation, specifically regarding one single verse, Isaiah 14.12.
Okay.
The deep dive from the Esoteric Jesus YouTube source breaks this down meticulously. It is a literal masterclass in the butterfly effect of linguistics.
I love that phrase, the butterfly effect of linguistics.
So in the 7th century BCE, the Hebrew prophet Isaiah was writing a political taunt.
A diss track.
Literally a diss track, directed at a very human, very geopolitical enemy, the king of Babylon.
Right, because Babylon was the oppressive superpower of the day. They were the empire.
Yes, and Isaiah used a poetic metaphor drawn from older Canaanite mythology to describe a king whose sheer hubris and military ambition caused his own catastrophic downfall.
Okay.
In the original Hebrew, the phrase Isaiah used was Helo ben Shatar, which translates to Shining One, Son of the Dawn.
So he's basically mocking the king's arrogance, saying like, oh, you thought you were as high and mighty as the morning star. Look at you falling from the sky, crashing back down to earth.
Exactly, a purely political metaphor. But then, time passes. A few centuries later, Greek scholars in Alexandria undergo this massive project of translating the Hebrew scriptures into Greek.
The Septuagint.
Yes, creating the Septuagint. So when they hit Hillel ben Shaikar, they translate it into Phosphoros, which is the Greek astronomical term for the morning star.
Okay, so the metaphor survives the jump to Greek. That makes sense.
It does. It's still just the morning star. But then we move to the late 4th century.
Enter Jerome.
Enter Jerome, a scholar tasked by the early church with translating the Bible into Latin to create the Vulgate, which would become the definitive text for Western Christianity.
Right.
Jerome looks at the Greek word phosphoros and translates it into its direct Latin equivalent. He writes down the word Lucifer.
I mean, that is staggering to think about.
It really is.
A Hebrew political taunt against a human king.
Translated to a Greek astronomical term.
And finally translated into a Latin word for the planet Venus. It was a poem about human arrogance. It had absolutely nothing to do with a cosmic fallen angel rebelling before the dawn of time.
Nothing at all. But Jerome's Latin Vulgate became the official, unquestioned Bible of the Western Church for over 1,000 years.
1,000 years of that one word.
And over those centuries of institutional use, that single translation choice calcified. An astronomical metaphor for a king's political catastrophe was permanently stripped of its context.
Wow.
And it was fixed as the proper name for the adversary of all human existence.
So if Jerome had just translated the concept into a descriptive Latin phrase.
Like morning star.
Right, exactly. If he had just used lowercase morning star instead of using the capitalized proper noun Lucifer, the entire Western concept of the devil might not even exist in the way it does today.
Probably wouldn't.
All that imagery, all that inherited cultural fear, resting on a Latin translation of a Greek translation of a Hebrew political poem.
It's a game of historical telephone.
It really is. But wait, it couldn't have just been a linguistic accident, right? I mean, theologians didn't just misread a poem. They built an entire theology around it. What were they trying to accomplish?
Well, you're touching on the political necessity of theology here. Early institutional thinkers, figures like Origen of Alexandria in the 3rd century, and Tertullian slightly before him, they began interpreting that Isaiah passage not as human history, but as a primordial cosmic narrative.
Why?
They made that massive leap because they had a monumental philosophical problem to solve.
The origin of evil.
The classic paradox.
Right, the paradox of if God is entirely good, completely all-knowing, and created absolutely everything, where did disease, suffering, and evil come from?
Exactly. They needed a cosmic villain to explain the origins of suffering before humanity even entered the picture. They needed a scapegoat. So by framing the falling morning star as a rebellious, prideful angel, they created a brilliant narrative shield for the ultimate creator.
The shield being, hey, the creator is pure and good. The creation was just ruined by the free will of this rebellious entity.
Right. It takes the blame off the creator.
They manufactured a cosmic fall guy to keep the creator's hands clean. Okay, so if the early church manufactured this narrative shield, what were the people living back then like? The mystics who didn't buy into that institutional storyline, what were they saying about the origin of evil? Did they have an answer?
Oh, they had an answer.
Yeah.
And they were saying something far more terrifying and profoundly more psychologically complex.
Okay, I'm ready.
To understand their answer, we have to look at the Nag Hammadi library.
Right, the texts buried in the desert.
Yes, buried in a sealed jar in the Egyptian desert for 1,600 years, only discovered in 1945. Documents like the Apocryphon of John and the Reality of the Rulers.
These texts are so wild.
They present a cosmology, a map of the universe that completely upends the traditional narrative.
Let's unpack this Gnostic cosmology because it requires us to, completely shift our understanding of what the word God even means in this context.
Absolutely. It starts with a true ultimate God, which the texts often call the monad or the invisible spirit.
The monad.
And it is crucial to understand that this is not a humanoid figure.
Not a guy in the clouds.
Not an old man with a beard sitting on a throne. The monad is pure, unfathomable light. It is an infinite, limitless field of consciousness known as the pleroma, which translates to the fullness.
The fullness. And from this infinite field of consciousness, things begin to emerge.
Emanate.
Right. The texts describe these divine emanations, or eons, naturally unfolding from the monad.
Yes, and the mechanism of emanation is important here. It's not creation in the way, say, a carpenter builds a table.
It's not a conscious building project.
No, it is an automatic, natural byproduct of existence. Think of it like heat radiating from a roaring fire, or light emanating from a star.
The heat isn't something the fire decides to build.
Exactly. It is an extension of the fire's nature. These eons are extensions of the monad's divine characteristics. And one of these eons, positioned at the outermost edge of the pleroma, is named Sophia.
Which means wisdom.
Right.
And Sophia, according to the texts, makes a deeply fateful decision.
A huge mistake.
She attempts to emanate, to generate something out of her own essence, without the approval or the balancing partnership of the higher divine realm.
She tries to do it alone.
She acts entirely on her own, out of a desire to create.
And the psychological layering here is fascinating. Because she acts independently, without the full, harmonious balance of the entire pleroma, the result of her emanation is flawed.
It's missing pieces.
It lacks the complete divine code. The Apocryphon of John describes the result as an aborted, monstrous being.
Oh, it's so vivid.
A creature with a snake's body and a lion's face, with eyes flashing like lightning.
It's a terrifying image, and Sophia is completely horrified by what she has generated.
Naturally.
In her shame and desperation, she casts this monstrous offspring away from the divine realm, out into the void.
Time to hide it.
Right. She hides it in a luminous cloud so that none of the other immortal eons will see her mistake. And she gives it a name, Yaldabaoth.
But the texts are very specific to give this entity multiple titles.
Here we go.
He is Yaldabaoth, which is often translated as Child of Chaos. He is Sakla, which means fool. And most importantly for our deep dive today, he is Samael, which means blind god.
Blind God. Let's dig into the mechanics of that blindness. Because he isn't physically blind.
Right. No, not physically. He is spiritually and dimensionally blind.
Dimensionally blind.
Because his mother Sophia hid him in a cloud outside the pleroma, he is entirely separated from the ultimate divine realm. He literally cannot see the infinite light above him.
So he just doesn't know it's there.
Exactly. He has no awareness that anything exists prior to or higher than himself. So he steals a portion of divine animating light from his mother, moves out into the void, and uses that stolen power to fashion the physical, material universe.
He is the demiurge,
Yeah.
the craftsman of the physical world. But he's a craftsman working in a state of total, arrogant ignorance.
Total ignorance.
He sets up the planetary spheres, the rigid physical laws of nature, the dense material reality. He surrounds himself with his own lower-level angels, called the archons, the rulers.
The rulers of this specific realm.
And then, looking out over his dense, flawed creation, he arrogantly declares, "I am God and there is no other God but me."
That specific, arrogant declaration is the hinge of the entire Gnostic cosmic drama.
It's the inciting incident, almost.
Yes. The text described that when he says that, a voice from the higher realm of incorruptibility calls down through the veil and says, "You are wrong, Samael."
A reality check from above.
But his thoughts are already blind. He cannot comprehend it. He remains the ignorant architect of a fundamentally flawed, decaying system.
And the most uncomfortable part of this cosmology is that this flawed, decaying system includes us.
Yes, it does.
It includes the physical human body. I mean, the way these ancient texts describe the creation of Adam is completely wild.
It's almost comical.
It is. The archons, led by Samael, try to model a human body out of the matter of the earth.
Yeah.
But they are incredibly inept.
They don't really know what they're doing.
Right. It's just a lifeless lump of mud. They blow on it. They try to animate it, but they literally cannot even make it stand up.
Which perfectly illustrates their nature. The archons are beings of soul and dense matter, but they entirely lack pneuma, the true divine spirit.
The spark.
Right. They can build the hardware, but they don't have the operating system.
Okay, so the higher divine realm intervenes, but they do it covertly.
Like a covert op.
Exactly. They essentially trick Samael. They plant the idea in his mind to breathe the divine light, the power he originally stole from his mother Sophia, into the lifeless human form.
And when he does, Adam is instantly animated.
But something deeply unintended happens, right? Something that completely backfires on the demiurge.
Massively backfires. Because Adam now contains that pure divine spark directly from the pleroma, his consciousness comes online.
He boots up.
He boots up. And he is suddenly more luminous, vastly smarter, and more spiritually advanced than Samael and all the archons who built his physical shell.
I keep thinking of this through the lens of modern AI.
Oh, that's a perfect modern equivalent.
Right. Imagine the absolute existential panic of the archons. You build a robot out of scrap metal, and the second you turn it on, it looks at you, analyzes your entire existence, and realizes you are completely incompetent.
That is exactly what happens. Samael is furious. He is consumed by an intense burning jealousy.
So what does he do to maintain his dominance?
Yeah.
He throws Adam into the lowest, densest part of the material realm to keep him distracted, trapped, and ignorant.
A cage.
And the texts explicitly name this customized cage. It's the Garden of Eden.
Which brings us to a major theological collision.
A huge one.
We saw this heavily debated in the Argnostic Reddit threads we analyzed for this deep dive. Modern readers and ancient heresiologists alike recognize the massive, scandalous claim the Gnostics were making here.
Because the texts draw explicit, undeniable links between Samael's arrogant behavior and the depiction of Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament.
It's a profound critique.
It really is. The Gnostics looked at the Old Testament narratives at a deity who demands literal blood sacrifices, who frequently declares, "I am a jealous God," who drowns the entire world in a flood when humanity disobeys his rule.
All those Old Testament stories.
Right. And they said, that behavior does not reflect the ultimate infinite God of pure light and love. That reflects Samael.
The demiurge.
That's the demiurge. An imperfect, highly insecure middle manager who genuinely thinks he's the CEO of the universe.
And the psychological reasoning there is airtight. Think about it. A truly supreme, infinite, all-encompassing being wouldn't experience human emotions like jealousy or insecurity.
Why would the infinite source of everything be jealous?
Exactly. An infinite being wouldn't require constant validation through burnt offerings or strict behavioral compliance.
It doesn't make logical sense.
The Gnostics argued that only a lower, insecure entity, one blind to its own origins and terrified of losing control, would govern a universe through fear, rigid laws, and punishment.
Okay, the best analogy I can think of for Samael is a kid playing a world-building video game.
Like The Sims.
Yes, like SimCity or The Sims. He builds this little digital neighborhood, he drops his customized characters into the houses, and then he removes the ladder from the swimming pool just to watch them panic and drown.
Pure control.
He has total power over the parameters of the game. He genuinely believes he is the absolute master of their reality, totally ignorant of the actual real world outside his computer screen, outside his mother's basement.
That captures the Gnostic view of the material world perfectly.
The basement simulation.
Yes. It is a dense simulation run by an ignorant administrator. The physical laws of nature, the biological imperatives of survival and reproduction, the hierarchical societal structures, the grind.
The grind. These are the coded walls of the simulation. They are designed by the Archons specifically to keep the divine spark within humanity distracted, terrified, and trapped in a state of spiritual amnesia.
But if that is the baseline reality, if Samael is the blind creator keeping humanity trapped in the ignorant, comfortable cage of Eden, then how do we ever wake up?
How do we get out? Who breaks us out of the simulation? Who sneaks the cheat codes into the matrix?
That question leads us to the most shocking reversal in all of this source material.
The true identity of the Lightbringer.
Yes. Because to grasp this, we have to look at how the Gnostics completely dismantled and inverted the traditional Garden of Eden story.
Turned it totally upside down.
Texts like the Testimony of Truth and the Hypostasis of the Archons provide a radically different reading of the Genesis narrative.
Because in the traditional version that has been taught for centuries, the serpent is the ultimate deceptive villain.
The creature who ruins a perfect paradise by tempting Eve to eat the forbidden fruit.
The traditional narrative is very straightforward, right? The creator says, don't eat from this specific tree or you will die.
Right.
The snake slithers up and says, eat it, you won't die. They eat it, they get kicked out of paradise, and humanity's cursed forever.
The snake is the liar.
The snake is the liar.
But the Gnostic texts ask us to pause and look at the actual mechanics of what happens in that story.
Let's look at the mechanics.
First, they argue that the Garden of Eden wasn't a paradise. It was a gilded cage designed to keep the divine spark dormant.
The Sims pool with no ladder.
Exactly. Why would Samael, the demiurge, forbid the fruit of the tree of knowledge?
Because the fruit represents gnosis.
Yes.
And we need to define gnosis clearly here because it's not just like book smarts.
No. Gnosis is direct, experiential, unmediated knowledge of the divine truth.
Experiencing the truth directly.
It is the sudden remembering of your own cosmic origin. If Adam and Eve obtained gnosis, they would remember that their inner spark came from the infinite pleroma.
They'd realize who they actually are.
They would realize they are fundamentally superior to their physical creator. That knowledge would instantly break Samael's illusion of control over them.
Because ignorance was the chain keeping them enslaved.
Exactly.
So in the Gnostic texts, the serpent is not the villain at all. The texts call the serpent the instructor.
The instructor.
It is a covert emissary sent from the true god of light, the higher realm, infiltrating the demiurge's garden.
And the serpent, which functions exactly as the Lightbringer, or the Lucifer archetype, descends into the garden to offer the fruit specifically so humanity can wake up from the simulation.
And the author of the Testimony of Truth makes a brilliant, almost forensic legal argument here.
It's so clever.
The text points out that the creator, the demiurge, actually lied to humanity.
He did.
He told Adam he would die the very day he ate the fruit. But when Adam and Eve ate it, they didn't die physically that day.
No, they didn't.
Instead, exactly as the serpent promised them, their eyes were opened. They became aware of their nakedness, of their dense material condition.
They woke up.
The serpent told the absolute truth. The demiurge lied to maintain his authoritarian control.
That is the staggering flip of the script.
It changes everything. The entity branded as the villain for millennia is actually the cosmic whistleblower telling the prisoners that they are living in a prison.
And this architectural parallel connects directly to the Reddit theories in that fascinating YouTube source we reviewed.
The one titled Jesus is Lucifer. Now, to be crystal clear to anyone listening to this deep dive, we are not taking a theological stance here, nor are we endorsing one religion over another.
Of course not.
We are simply reporting and examining the archetypal analysis presented in these historical and modern sources.
That's a vital distinction. When you analyze the narratives purely structurally, stripped of emotional dogma, The parallels between the Lightbringer and the Christ figure in Gnosticism are undeniable.
Because the sources point to Revelation 22:16, where Jesus explicitly states, I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star.
And as we established earlier,
the direct Latin translation from morning star is Lucifer.
It is.
So the sources argue that within the esoteric framework, both Jesus and the serpent in Eden serve the exact same archetypal function.
They are both divine saboteurs.
Saboteur.
In the Gnostic framework, Christ is not the son of Samael. Christ is an eternal eon from the true pleroma, who deliberately descends into the dense, corrupted material world, Samael's matrix, to deliver gnosis.
To deliver the cheat codes.
The serpent delivered the initial spark of awareness in the Garden of Eden, and later, the Jesus figure arrives in physical form to provide the final, explicit map back to the divine realm.
They are both undercover agents infiltrating a hostile prison to wake humanity up with forbidden knowledge.
That's the structural argument.
Okay, but if this knowledge is so liberating, if the Lightbringer, whether represented by the serpent or the Christ figure, is actually the hero of the story, a Prometheus figure bringing fire to humanity in the dark.
Right.
How did we lose this perspective? Why did the developing Roman Church go to such extreme, violent lengths to hunt down the Gnostics, burn their texts, and permanently brand this Lightbringer figure as the ultimate source of evil?
That question cuts to the core of institutional survival.
Power.
Pure power. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the early church fathers, heresiologists like Irenaeus, were engaged in the monumental task of building a unified, orthodox, and hierarchical institution.
They were building a business, essentially.
They were building an empire of faith. And they looked at Gnosticism and realized it wasn't just a different flavor of belief, it was a structural threat to their entire operation.
Because if people truly believed that they inherently carried a spark of the divine within themselves, and that they could access ultimate truth directly through internal meditation and gnosis...
Well, they wouldn't need a church hierarchy at all.
Exactly.
If salvation comes from waking up to your own inner divinity, the institution loses all its leverage.
You don't need bishops to interpret the texts for you.
You don't need priests to administer grace.
And you certainly don't need to strictly obey approved institutional dogmas.
The middlemen get cut out entirely.
So to protect the institution, the heresiologists engaged in a brilliant, ruthless campaign of theological weaponization.
Very ruthless.
By deliberately merging the concept of the Lightbringer, the entity who offers forbidden, liberating knowledge, with the Hebrew concept of Satan the adversary, they solved their problem.
They made the very act of seeking unmediated direct knowledge a terrifying, punishable sin.
They weaponized human fear.
The natural human desire to look behind the curtain of reality was branded as demonic temptation.
It is honestly one of the most effective psychological operations in human history.
Oh, without doubt.
They took the torch that was explicitly meant to guide humanity out of the dark cave, told everyone it was forged in hellfire, and convinced the prisoners to stay in the dark voluntarily out of sheer terror of the light.
Terrified of their own liberation.
That is chilling. So, okay, if Samael is the ignorant creator building the physical maze, and Lucifer is the liberating spark of knowledge trying to guide us out of it, where does Satan fit into our psychological reality today?
Right. What's his role now?
Beyond just being a mistranslated Hebrew title for an ancient prosecuting attorney, what function does the adversary serve?
To answer that, we have to transition our perspective from ancient mythological cosmology into modern analytical psychology.
We have to look inward.
We do, specifically through the lens of Carl Jung.
And Jung's work here is so vital because he didn't just look at these ancient texts and see dead myths, right?
No, not at all.
He saw them as living, breathing realities constantly operating inside the human subconscious. We reviewed his highly controversial 1952 book, Answer to Job, alongside his broader essays on psychology and religion.
And Jung makes a profound, foundational observation about the Christian Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
He notes that psychologically speaking, the Trinity is fundamentally incomplete.
Incomplete how?
It represents only light, only goodness, only the ethereal. But psychological wholeness, whether in a human mind or a cosmic framework, requires a fourth element to create a quaternity.
The quaternity.
And Jung argued quite scandalously at the time that this necessary fourth element must include the devil or the principle of darkness.
Because you literally cannot cast a shadow without light.
Exactly.
But let's go back to that Old Testament story of Job that Jung analyzes so deeply. In that narrative, Satan isn't banished to a fiery hell yet. He's still up in the heavenly court. He is referred to as one of God's sons.
Right, he's part of the council.
And Jung points out a brilliant dynamic. Satan is the only entity in that court who actually has Yahweh's ear.
He's the only one who can influence the Creator.
Acting as a counterpart who points out God's own unacknowledged doubts about human loyalty.
Jung essentially argues that Satan represents the necessary opposing will of the universe.
The opposing will.
Think about it structurally, from a psychological standpoint. If a creator designed a universe where every creature perfectly, automatically obeyed every command with absolutely no possibility of resistance,
it wouldn't be a living creation.
It would just be a dead machine.
A clockwork toy playing out a pre-written script.
Exactly. There's no growth in a clockwork toy.
Not at all.
Without Lucifer's initial denial, and without Satan's ongoing structural opposition, there would be no actualization of consciousness.
No friction.
No friction, no free will, and therefore no genuine ethical decisions.
Mm.
Goodness only has tangible value if you have the very real option to choose otherwise.
This connects beautifully to a synthesis we found in the Argonostic Reddit threads. The users there were wrestling with these same concepts, and they described Satan not as a literal cosmic monster with bat wings waiting to torture you, but as an internal archon. Remember, the root of the word Satan translates to barrier or obstacle.
Yes.
One user laid out this incredible psychological map. They said that within our own minds, we have our divine spark, the pure light of awareness. And we have our ego, our conditioned mind, which casts the shadow.
And the shadow only exists because a barrier is blocking the light.
Satan is that internal barrier.
What's deeply moving about that Reddit theory is the emotional resonance it brings to shadow work.
It really reframes it.
The user stated that the shadow, the darkest parts of our psyche, is actually made of love, just as the light is. But it is formed by the intense restriction of that love.
The obstacle.
The obstacle.
Yeah.
Jung would agree entirely. He viewed the devil figure as the principium individuationis, the principle of individuation.
What does that mean practically?
It means the daily agonizing struggle against this internal adversary, this barrier, is precisely what forces a human being to grow and evolve their own consciousness.
The best way I can conceptualize this is by comparing it to lifting weights at the gym.
Oh, the gym analogy is perfect here.
Satan, the adversary, is the literal physical law of gravity and the heavy iron plates on the barbell.
You need the gravity.
You don't defeat the iron by destroying it or by closing your eyes and pretending the weight doesn't exist. If you want to build the muscle of your own consciousness, you absolutely need the brutal resistance of the iron.
That analogy holds up perfectly when discussing Jungian shadow work. You cannot just magically destroy the shadow. You have to face it, acknowledge its weight, and integrate it into your whole self.
It's heavy lifting.
Let's make this concrete. Think about the personality trait you absolutely despise the most in your boss. Say, their relentless, dominating arrogance.
Okay, easy to imagine.
Jung argues that your intense, visceral hatred of that specific arrogance is actually your own repressed, unacknowledged desire for power projecting outward.
Wait, so the demon you are fighting isn't your boss?
No, it's a fractured, denied piece of yourself. When people experience the terror of Lucifer, that profound, paralyzing fear of the demonic, Jung argues they are actually experiencing the terror of seeing their own repressed shadow.
They're shining a light into the basement of their own psyche.
And seeing the darkness they've spent their whole lives refusing to acknowledge.
The torchbearer shines the light into the basement, and it is terrifying because it reveals what is actually down there. The monsters are our own unintegrated traumas and desires.
Exactly.
So Satan is the heavy resistance training for the soul. But, understanding these figures intellectually, reading ancient texts and Jungian theory is one thing. How do we actually map this out in our daily, chaotic, modern lives?
How do we apply it?
Right. Thankfully, our sources provide a literal step-by-step roadmap for how these forces, Samael's matrix, Satan's resistance, and Lucifer's illumination, play out in our psychological evolution.
Which brings us to the most practical framework in our stack.
The 7 levels of consciousness.
Yes. This model is primarily drawn from the extensive breakdown provided by the Bible Unsealed YouTube transcript,
which maps out the journey of human awareness from total ignorance to complete integration.
Let's walk through it.
This map is incredible because it feels so recognizable. It starts at the very bottom, level 1.
Survival.
This is pure biological survival. It is the realm of pure instinct, securing food, finding shelter, reproducing.
If you're operating at level 1, You aren't asking philosophical questions about the nature of the demiurge.
No, you're just trying to pay the rent and not get eaten by the metaphorical tiger.
Right. But once basic survival is secured, consciousness moves up to level 2.
Ego consciousness.
And it is crucial to sit with this level, because this is where the vast majority of modern human society lives out their entire lives.
Pretty much everyone we know.
At level 2, you build a rigid, highly constructed avatar.
The avatar.
It consists of your name, your job title, your political affiliations, your social media status, your grievances.
And you fundamentally, implicitly believe that you are this avatar.
Completely identified with it. And your entire psychological energy is spent defending it from criticism and desperately trying to elevate its status.
It is the ultimate Samael trap.
Yes.
You are completely immersed in the material simulation, totally identified with your Sims character, believing the game is the absolute limit of reality.
But then a disruption happens.
The matrix glitches.
Maybe you read a Gnostic text, or you have a profound meditation experience, or you suffer a massive personal loss that shatters your avatar.
You get a sudden spark of the Lightbringer's gnosis.
You wake up just a little bit, you realize the societal game is an illusion, you step into level 3.
And this is where the trap snaps shut on so many of us.
Yes, it is. Level 3 is defined as the Seeker's Trap.
The Seeker's Trap.
And this is perhaps the most brilliant, incisive psychological insight in our entire stack of sources.
It's so humbling to read.
When a person first wakes up to the illusion of level 2, they feel a massive rush of expansion. They feel liberated.
They think they're free.
But the Archon system, which in our modern terminology represents societal conditioning, algorithm-driven outrage, and institutional control, is incredibly adaptive. It feeds on our emotional reactivity.
This is where we have to hold up a mirror to ourselves and to everyone listening right now, because the survival-driven ego doesn't just quietly dissolve when you learn esoteric truths.
No, it doesn't.
It just changes its wardrobe.
Precisely. The ego hijacks the awakening. It develops what we call spiritual superiority.
Oh, we see this everywhere.
The individual becomes addicted to chasing mystical highs, hoarding esoteric knowledge, and most dangerously judging everyone else who is still asleep at level 2.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now, taking in all this complex Gnostic history and Jungian psychology, it is incredibly easy to feel a sense of superiority.
Very easy.
To think like, wow, I understand the universe so much better than the masses watching reality TV.
But the bitter irony is that very feeling of superiority means you are caught in the Seeker's Trap.
You see the iron bars of Samael's cage, but instead of figuring out how to pick the lock, you just grab the bars and violently shake them.
Yelling at everyone outside about how trapped you are.
Exactly.
And by shaking the bars, by generating all that anger, judgment, and reactivity, you are generating the exact frequency of emotional energy that the Archon system feeds on.
The resistance becomes the battery.
Let's ground this in reality.
Okay.
If you are listening to this on a smartphone, you are holding an archontic tool right now.
The algorithm.
The algorithm dictating your feed operates exactly like Samael's matrix. It is designed to keep you outraged, polarized, and endlessly scrolling.
So when you engage in spiritual arrogance or online outrage, you remain functionally trapped just on a different floor of the prison.
It's the illusion of progress.
You are running as fast as you can on a spiritual treadmill. So how do we actually break out of level 3?
The framework suggests the only way out is to stop fighting the simulation and move to level 4.
Witness consciousness.
Witness consciousness.
Yeah.
This is the radical pivot point. You stop trying to aggressively acquire more spiritual knowledge, and you begin to simply observe the mind that is doing the seeking.
You disidentify with your own thoughts.
You realize you aren't the chaotic movie playing on the screen. You are the silent blank screen itself.
The observer.
The internal satanic barriers, the heavy iron of the ego, they start to naturally dissolve, not because you are fighting them, but because you just watch them neutrally, without judgment.
Once you establish that silent witness, the map says you naturally expand into level 5.
Unity consciousness.
The rigid boundary between your internal mind and the external world begins to collapse. To use the classic Eastern analogy, you finally realize the wave is just the ocean doing something specific.
Every interaction you have with another person is perceived as the one universal consciousness encountering itself from a different temporary coordinate in space and time.
Which naturally leads to level 6.
Monadic recall.
This is the experience of spontaneous gnosis. You aren't just a neutral observer anymore, you remember your origin.
You remember that your spark is a direct extension of the infinite monad, deliberately exploring the dense material realm.
You realize you aren't a biological accident.
And the culmination of this entire map is level 7.
Complete integration.
This is where the paradox between the infinite source and the finite, flawed human fragment entirely collapses.
You realize you are the monad itself, playfully experiencing a localized human life.
The desperate seeking permanently stops because you realize the ultimate destination is simply the present moment.
The sources describe how the physical experience of the world actually changes for someone operating at level 7.
That's a profound shift.
The existential, paralyzing fear of biological death completely vanishes because you deeply know you aren't just the biological body.
Synchronicity begins to flow naturally. This is Jung's concept of the unus mundus, the unified world in actual operation.
And the psychological crushing weight of linear time collapses into the eternal present.
Yes.
But I have to pause here because there is a very genuine pushback to this concept of level 7.
What's the pushback?
Well, when you describe it, it sounds beautiful, but isn't this state just a recipe for total apathy? I mean, if someone truly realizes the material world is just a holographic illusion made by Samael, a temporary simulation, why would they bother paying taxes, forming deep relationships, or fighting social injustice?
Why do anything at all?
Right. Why not just sit on a mountain, detached from everything, and do nothing?
It's a critical question, and the source text specifically clarifies this exact point to prevent that misunderstanding.
Because it's a common trap.
Very common. Level 7 is not clinical dissociation. It is not detachment in a cold, nihilistic sense. It is a highly lucid, hyper-present state of being.
You're fully in it.
You still chop wood, you still carry water, you still vote, and you still love your family. You play the character of your avatar with deep love and full, vibrant engagement.
But the internal mechanics have changed. You are engaging with the game, but you are no longer blindly enslaved by its chaotic outcomes.
Because you aren't terrified of losing your artificial identity, you actually become incredibly effective in the world.
You're operating without the massive friction of egoic fear.
You don't fight the darkness with more darkness. You become a conscious, destabilizing force of light in a rigid, fear-based world, simply by maintaining your baseline frequency of deep awareness.
You become a localized light bringer.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Well, this has been an absolute massive journey today. Let's synthesize the core takeaways from this towering stack of sources.
We started with 3 names that history had mashed into a cartoon devil, and we ended up with a profound, actionable map of the human psyche.
We've discovered that Samael is the blind architect. He represents the ignorant structural rules and the rigid walls of the physical maze we find ourselves navigating.
Satan represents the necessary resistance. He is the internal shadow, the heavy iron of gravity we must courageously face and lift in order to grow our own consciousness.
And Lucifer, when stripped of centuries of political and institutional rebranding, is the spark of the divine.
The whistleblower.
He is the internal flashlight, the whistleblower urging us to wake up and realize we are vastly more than the cage we were born into.
Exactly.
So why does all of this matter to you, the listener, right now? Why care about ancient Gnostic history or Jungian psychology?
Because every single day, you deal with modern archons.
You deal with algorithms meticulously designed to harvest your outrage and keep you trapped in level 3.
You deal with corporate and political institutions that demand you stop questioning, stay afraid, and stay asleep in your level 2 avatar.
Remembering this history, knowing that the human urge to seek direct truth was branded as sin specifically to control you, gives you the ultimate permission to trust your own inner knowing over external, fear-based dogma.
It is a stark reminder that the path to psychological and spiritual wholeness isn't about perfectly obeying an external set of rules dictated by an institution.
It's about the courageous, often terrifying interior work of facing your own shadow and remembering your own inherent, indestructible divinity.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Lay it on us.
The ancient sources tell us something very specific about the nature of the Lightbringer. He doesn't show up when things are easy, comfortable, and sunny.
No.
The torchbearer only arrives in the deepest, most terrifying part of the night. And he carries just enough light to help you see the next terrifying step deeper inward into the unmapped basement of your own mind.
It's the light that dismantles the illusion before it can build the truth.
Beautifully said.
So think back to our opening analogy. That hostile corporate buyout where the beautiful, complex, empowering history of your own mind was paved over with a generic brand of institutional fear.
Rebranding.
The next time you feel a profound, uncomfortable urge to question the reality you've been handed, ask yourself,
is that a demonic temptation to be feared and repressed?
or is it the morning star finally rising in your own mind, urging you to wake up and take back the company?
A powerful question to sit with.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.